Peace, what's happening? Riot Started TV, we back again. To your favorite platform on the planet, Black Power Media. Tonight we have a real heavy-duty show. One of my favorite people on the planet. But before we introduce him, I want to give a shout out to the FTP movement, our organization. I want to shout the FTP movement out because of the fact that we have a new initiative. It's called Liberation Housing. And Liberation Housing is a situation that we're putting together where we are purchasing homes so that we can take care of our veteran freedom fighters. Because oftentimes we have so many freedom fighters who put in work their entire life, and oftentimes they are imprisoned and released, and there's no 401k. So one of the things the organization is doing right now is putting together this whole Liberation Housing program. So we want you all to make sure that you check out our website. It's scrolling across your screen now, and kind of get familiar with what's going on as far as our latest endeavor, which is Liberation Housing. Anyway, aside from that, we are definitely pleased to have you all back on the platform again. Tonight is one of the days or the evenings that I've been looking forward to because of the fact that I have the opportunity to interview someone I consider to be one of my OGs, who I've learned a lot from in a little bit of time over the years. So one of the things I learned from him was the fact that there was a prison movement. Most of the time, oftentimes, folks talk about the movement on the streets. They talk about the Panther Party. They talk about the RNA. They talk about SNCC, so on and so forth. But we don't hear about what was going on behind the wall. So tonight, I want to bring to our platform a brother who's no stranger to the movement. He is a freedom fighter. Some of you may have seen him in numerous documentaries. One in particular was Crips and Blood, Made in America, which outlined what went on during the 60s and 50s and 70s era on the streets of Los Angeles. But he's also a comrade of Field Marshal George Jackson. He's also an archivist, historian for the Black August Organizing Committee. So I want to give a strong welcome to my comrade and OG, Kamasi. Kamasi, how you doing tonight, brother?
All right, man. I just want to say greetings to you and everyone that tunes into your program. And I'm ready for the interview to get started.
Right on, man. I appreciate you, taking time out of your day. I know you 3 hours behind, and but you always on time. For folks who are unfamiliar with you and may not have heard of you or a quote unquote prison movement, can you give us a brief introduction if you don't mind?
You're kind of breaking up. You want to say that again to me, please?
Yes, sir. I said for folks who may not be familiar with you, can you give us a brief introduction of who you are and where you come from?
Okay, my name is Kumasi. Born on the East Coast, raised in Los Angeles. So I've been here. I'm a transplant from New York. I've been here since I was 3 years old and grew up in Los Angeles, in the streets of Los Angeles. Very early on, when I was 14, went to some of the youth detention camps, what they call California Youth Authority. Did 3 years, from 61 to 64, got out. I went back, graduated to the prison system in 1965. So I stayed in California prisons from 65 to 75. As a matter of fact, I got kicked out of every prison in California. I arrived at Tracy in 1966, and because of some very intense struggle to win religious rights and the combat conflict that took place as a result of being involved in that struggle, got kicked out of Tracy in 1967 and went to Soledad. I get to Soledad Central, maybe 30, 60 days after Bunchy and Eldridge had just left. And so I became sort of an understudy of Bunchy and stepped into his shoes. He's from my neighborhood, and the pride of our neighborhood suggests that I shouldn't let him be a hard act to follow. I can't come short of his performance, being steadfast as a militant. And, so the guys that was there explained to me everything that had happened during Eldridge and Bunchy's time at Soledad and how they had organized the African history and culture class, which became more than a study group. In the early days in this country, before you had Black students unions, you had Afro-American Association. Donald Warden, he changed his name. I can't think of what his name is now, if he's still alive, but it was Donald Warden. They were the first ones in that organization to refer to themselves as Afro-Americans. And it was a student organization that graduated various leaders. Huey Newton, David Hilliard, Ayuko Babu, even Ryan Karinga. All of them come out of the Afro-American Association in the Bay Area of California. I think it came out of San Francisco, one of the colleges. Probably it didn't come out of Merritt College in Oakland, and it came out of another college, maybe in San Francisco, probably. I'm not sure. But he had a radio program, and we used to listen to his radio program on our earphones in prison. Then in 1969, I got kicked out of Soledad and went to San Quentin. In 1970, August 25th, 1970, got kicked out of San Quentin and went to Folsom. And from Folsom, I stayed there until 1972. And they put me out of Folsom and sent me down to Chino. I got kicked out of a special program in Chino, went back to Soledad, then up to Vacaville to a psychiatric evaluation program to see if I could react in a way they wanted to see me react if I had ever been released back to the streets. And so fought my way through that program, got a date right before I planned to escape. And went down to Chino, and then in 1975 in March I was released.
Wow, I'm sitting here listening to you talk about prisons kicking you out of prisons. I mean, I'm really, for folks that's listening. I mean, I know they're like, how do you get kicked out of a prison and sent to another prison? How does that work? Because of the fact you saying it like you was going to Yale and then they kicked you out of Yale and put you in community college over here, so on and so forth. Can you talk about that?
It was what they call disciplinary transfers. In the first place, when I came to prison, it was right after the Watts Rebellion of 1965 that they called the Watts Riot. Okay. I was so proud and full of myself because we had fought so well. All these other rebellions, the 92 Rodney King riots and, a lot of this other stuff, those are like shoplifting feasts or fests. There's not a lot of combat. We took pride in the fact that we actually fought in the streets for 6 days. And the only ones we saw that fought harder than us and better than us after we kicked that kind of stuff off, was Detroit and Newark, New Jersey.
Right on.
Okay, they were the ones that put in a whole lot more work than we did. They put up a lot more resistance. Matter of fact, it wasn't just resistance. They're the ones who initiated all of the combat in those two cities and did more than well, okay, in bringing the police and military guardsmen to their knees, making them back up. My slogan in Watts was that you can't win. It's not going to stop until you withdraw your troops. We got our backs up against the wall. There's no place else we can go, and we're not going to stop until you move out of our area. You have to pull up out of our territory because we see you as occupation troops, occupation forces. And so, you claim that you're here to protect and to serve the public, but you're protecting and serving the business interests that are here raping our communities and showing a lot of disrespect and belligerence. So that's who you're really protecting. From 38 service revolvers to 357 Magnums. And you'll ride around in an unmarked car in plain clothes and antagonize one of us. And if there's any kind of fuss in return, then you will kill that person. And you'll get taken off the streets until matters calm down. And then they'll put you back out on the streets and you'll kill somebody else. And so we just look at you as another gang. That's right. And so we advise you that by the time the sun goes down, you need to get out of our territory because it's on. We're going to treat you just like you're another gang in the streets. And so we were willing to fight, and we fought them so well that they had to call in an ex-CIA director named McComb to do a study and issue forth a report. They wanted to know, how did we fight so well? Who taught us? Who trained us? And they came to the conclusion that our whole rebellion and resistance movement for those 6 days was the byproduct of what they called outside agitators. Primarily, they blamed Robert Williams. And they said Robert Williams had trained us and flown over LA and dropped leaflets on us and told us to get out. Which is the furthest thing in the world from the truth. We knew of Robert Williams, but we had never seen him. We never had any contact or any relationship with him. We appreciated who he was and the work he had done in North Carolina, but we didn't have any contact with him. So, but that was the main thing. They wanted to know why and how we fought so well. I tried to tell them during the fight that we're the baddest running street fighters in America. We've been practicing on ourselves in this gang warfare. So, you're just another gang, and we already know how to deal with you.
Now, going
into prison right after that, as soon as that was over with, movements began. Older guys started to form organizations and movements. One of the first was the US organization. And you had several other organizations that popped up. Eventually, SNCC came to LA. Eventually, within a year or two, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, and even Rap Brown, Imam Jamil Abdul Alamin, they come to Los Angeles. To agitate. Back in those days, every place that Rap showed up, he would always tell the crowds that people get you a gun. They're using guns on us, and that was his password. Get a gun. Get your gun. Get ready. So I don't believe that we took on the definition. I think that sensational journalists started printing the word on magazines and newspapers, referring to us as Black militants. So that wasn't a term we invented, but we enjoyed it and we wore it and we kept it. Yeah, that's exactly what we are, Black militants. I'm actually of that mindset. I'm a Black militant.
Right.
And we didn't take nothing off of police and National Guardsmen. I wasn't scared of them in combat in the streets. So I wasn't afraid of prison guards. I looked at prisons, and the walls and the gun towers and the barbed wire and all that kind of stuff, something that couldn't really contain me and my spirit. And so I looked for other people who had the same mindset, the same willingness. You know, we were real prisoners, you know, because, and the reason I say that, we didn't think of ourselves as inmates because we're the kind of people that you got to keep the gun on us. Yeah, we're planning to escape. Yeah, we're planning to attack you. Yeah, we're planning to disrupt the business inside this penitentiary. As a matter of fact, we're planning to, as far as we can, as best as we can, destroy this place. You know, we have the same mindset as Fred Douglass, Nat Turner, you know, and all the people who were abolitionists during the slave trade period, okay, and the concentrations that they held us on plantations. So that's how we saw the prison. We defined it as just another plantation, as an extension of slavery. Instead of it being primarily agricultural, now it's industrial, because you got all these industrial shops. You got farms there, but most of the work is industrial. The state gets most of its revenue from the work committed to by prisoners. You know, a lot of people don't understand how prison labor supports states, how federal prison labor supports the federal government. You know, they don't realize all the stuff that is made in there. Here in California, all of the credentials and school desks on college campuses, state college campuses, are made by state prisoners. Paper products industries. You know how you can go into the restrooms in certain public places, or used to, and there would be this box on the wall, and you pull these paper towels out.
Right.
That came out of the paper products industry. Okay, they had canneries. They got farms, where the farms are, and the cattle on the farms. You know, the prisoners, they raise the cattle, they butcher the cattle, they take them into a butcher shop. Some of the meat from the butchered cattle is served to prisoners. The rest of it goes to meat packing companies out on the street. So there's a business between businesses on the street collaborating with prisons and the prison industrial industries. So there's just so many things that state prisoners and federal prisoners. I found out when I was in federal prison that I think in Atlanta or Leavenworth, one, they make parts of the U-2 jet, the bomber, the U-2 bomber, the stealth bomber, but they make parts of it. Your mail carriers, bags and sacks and stuff like, they make that, you know. They make uniforms. They make a whole lot of stuff that the state trades off with all of its different bureaus and departments, like highway patrol, like state police, their offices. You know, we were making 3-ring binders, and back in those days when they didn't have computers, anybody at a state office or in a state facility or even state law enforcement, if they had 3-ring binders where they kept all their notes and records, those 3-ring binders came from the 3-ring binder shop in Vacaville where we were working every day.
Wow.
Canneries, you know, you had 10-gallon cans of syrup, you had cans of vegetables, you had canned this, canned fruit, canned that, you know, as well as license plates. So I'm saying all that to try to make you understand why the importance of work strikes was understood by us, and that we didn't just have a strike for no reason at all.
Right.
You can force the entire prison population to go on a work strike, then you put a wrench in the wheels of production. And that means the money flow comes to a screeching halt. And without that money flow, a state can go bottoms up. Seriously, people don't know how much money prisoners contribute through their work to the financial stability of a state in this country. And that was one of our strategies when we wanted to fight them, and we wanted to bring them to the table to make concessions through the demands that we presented them. We had to have something we could use to threaten them with that would make them come to their senses and make them deal with us. And it was a way we also got them to hold a debate within the California legislature so that it just wasn't a concession. We made them legislate rules and laws into place so that they couldn't do those kind of things towards prisoners.
Wow. So it was you showing a connection between capitalism on a micro and macro level. You're talking about, because a lot of times folks aren't talking about how the state is fueled and funded and why it's so important, why the prison industrial complex, you know, as they say, would be a modern day slavery, because of the fact that you know, I mean, just the manpower, the labor, and the free labor, and the underpaid workers, and it's amazing how oftentimes they talk about these quote unquote foreign countries, these third world countries, where they outsource and where they're getting pennies on a dollar, but the same thing is taking place right here under our nose, right here in the United States. And
yes, sir. That's why it's so important to have so many millions of people locked up in this country, because they're just not locked up. Right. That is a cheap labor force. You can outsource labor and make your money, your capitalistic profits. If you outsource it to people in poor countries who, you know, 20 cents a day is like $100 to us, or you can make the prisoners throughout this country, you make them the bulk of your industrial and technical work. For matter of fact, today, if you go to an optometrist and you get glasses prescribed, when you go to buy the glasses and they put the medicine in the glasses, you know why it takes you a while to get those glasses? Because they send those glasses frames into the penitentiary and they have convicts put the medicine in there.
Wow. Wow.
Okay. So, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you all of the work that is done by prisoners. We had to demand a composite wage because in my day, they paid us 2 cents an hour to 16 cents an hour. The only way you got 16 cents an hour, you had to be a foreman. Blacks couldn't get 16 cents an hour. A black prisoner was only going to get no more than 12 cents an hour.
And this is in the 60s you're talking about?
60s and 70s.
Wow.
All right. So, you know, that was enough to just go and get canteen goods from the canteen. It was not as simple as I'm making it sound, because we had to actually wage war against the prison system. You listen to the audio version of me explaining the history in the audio version called Kumasi Speaks What is Black August. You'll hear me talking about how we sabotaged the prison work. You know, when I was in the clothing industries, how I got people to sew the zippers upside down and pockets inside out, and then set fire to, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars of pants that we had sewn and made in the prison clothing factory. You know, how we would sabotage that. So strike was one thing, sabotaging the work itself and destroying, because they would have a chart in their office telling you how many thousands of dollars a week you were producing for them through your work. And when they wanted bonuses, then they would have you come out at nighttime. They'd bring you in and make you work. And then the industrialists, who you never saw, but who owned all the labor, the real capitalists, they would bring them in and they would strut around and they would look at their slaves and they would look at the work that we're doing and they would be proud. And as a matter of fact, they would have the guys that worked in the kitchen make them special pastries and drinks and coffee and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it'd be, you know, like a little industrial conference for them where, you know, they were gloating over the people who was producing all that money for them and making them rich. And so, you know, most prisoners accepted that relationship, but the militants didn't. Right. And so those of us who were militant, we had a responsibility to try to overturn them circumstances as best as we could. Man. And so there's a lot of stuff that we did, a whole lot of stuff that we did. But our job, as far as I was concerned, was to attack the state every day.
Right on, right on.
You know, and to find as many ways as we could to do that. And so those are the kind of things, besides racial conflicts, that got us kicked out of one penitentiary. Whenever they got to the point where they couldn't control you in one prison, you know, then they came and kidnapped you in the middle of the night and shipped you out to another prison that they thought was tough enough with the measures they could impose upon you to subdue you and tie your energy up and get you to, you know, accept what was going on. And, you know, I didn't find a prison in the state of California that could do that. You know, so every prison I got kicked out of, I looked over my shoulder when I was leaving and I saw smoke and fire and tear gas coming over the wall, you know, headed to the next place, you know, to rally more troops, to get involved in more stuff. So however they was attacking us, if it was on religious basis, if it was on a color basis, you know, racial persecution. For instance, Ahmed Evans out of Cleveland, Ohio, had a poverty program. He secured a grant to run that program, but he bought a bunch of guns, and him and his brother and other comrades of his, they attacked the police, and they killed the captain, I think the chief, the captain, the lieutenant, and his brother got killed. And when they captured him, he said, my gun hadn't jammed, I got all of you. And so the next day, the police were so upset, they were coming into the Black community to just run crazy. They were just going to come in there and kill everybody that they could. And there was a brand new Black mayor, okay? I know his name, I can't say it right now, but he had to stand in the middle of an intersection and stretch his arms out and tell the police, no, man, y'all can't do that. Stokes, that was his name. Yeah, I can't think of his first name. It'll come to me, but his name was Stokes. And he stood in the middle of the street in an intersection, put his arms out and told the police, you cannot vamp on the Black community like you want to, turn around. So anyway, they had sentenced Ahmed Evans to die in the electric chair. And the day he was scheduled for execution, you know, all of us in the hole in San Quentin, we refused to eat and we refused to talk. We not a moment of silence, but an entire day of silence out of respect for that brother, you know. And we didn't want to eat, didn't want to exercise, we didn't want nothing. They finna take his life. And so his life is fixing to come to a standstill. As far as we're concerned, everything we are going through in here must come to a standstill out of respect and honor and as a tribute to him. Fortunately, they did not execute him, but he died in prison anyway. We think that they gave him cancer and killed him because it was just, he had so much backing from the population, the Black population in Cleveland, that we think that, you know, they didn't believe that his execution would take place in silence and without reaction from the public.
How difficult was it? I'm sorry. How difficult was it to organize behind the wall? Because it seems like
it was hard.
Okay.
No, it wasn't easy, but it was easier than it is now because in those days we had people from all over the state. And at first, there was competition for control and power. You know, there were power struggles between Northern Californians and Southern Californians. And then you had, besides that, you had gang conflicts and competition amongst each other. But once we went into prison, it was easy because we were under so much pressure. We were being attacked racially so strongly that it wasn't that hard to make everybody band together, no matter where they were from or what group they belonged to on the street. They understood in there that you're all Black. Now, don't forget, we're the children of Malcolm. You know, we come up listening to all of his speeches. We came up listening to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And we came up with Robert Williams' involvement and a whole bunch of other people. You know, we're in solid 1968. The police attacked the Republic of New Africa, which was brand new, in Detroit, in Aretha Franklin's father's church.
Right on. Yeah.
And it turned into a fight and a gunfight. And all those people went to jail that night, and it was a Black judge named Judge Crockett who got up out of his bed in the middle of the night and went to court and cut all them people loose that got busted at the church fighting the police and shooting the police. And he wound up, they had a major article on him in the Ebony magazine. But when they did the article of him in the Ebony magazine, they showed you the entire structure of the Republic of New Africa, okay? And we saw not only just their uniforms, but we saw the names of everybody, where they came from, what other, the close association to Malcolm and his Organization of African Unity, okay? They didn't just start the RNA, all of them had been in struggle all their lives. And now they had started the Republic of New Africa, and they had assumed titles and positions of authority in government. And matter of fact, when they were talking about acquiring the 5 states in the South, and they were selling $100 Malcolm X land grants so that anybody who bought a Malcolm X land grant could be a stakeholder in the properties being acquired in the South. You know, we were trying to fund the penitentiary, buying $100 a land, Malcolm X land grant, you know, through the Republic of New Africa. So we didn't only support ideologically and spiritually the struggles on the streets from which we came. We also supported all of the African liberation movements and the independence struggles on the African continent from whence we came. So all of that was tied in. And at one point, we were considered to be extraordinary and unique because we were told that in China, Mao Zedong, he had been locked up and he waited until he got back out to start a revolution. In this country and in that country and all these other countries, the revolutionaries, they waited till they got back on the ground and back to their areas of you know, where they live before they started anything. And they felt like, you know, you guys have started revolution from within the penitentiary. And that's halfway true. They knew that we were organizing, that we were studying, that we were collecting all the information we could around the world on independence movements and revolutionary movements, and that we had sworn our allegiance, you know, on a global level, not only to the struggle out here on the streets of America, but to our people, because you got to remember, now you're talking about Black History Month. Well, back in those days, it wasn't Black History Month, it was African Liberation Month. And May 5th, you know, Malcolm's birthday was African Liberation Day. So it was all about African liberation. And here, no matter where we were in the world, we understood that none of us are free unless all of us are free. And geography don't make no difference. So we weren't playing the geography game or the shade game. You know, we were all one people and we knew that, and it was one fight. So it's all for one and one for all. Those of us who were a part of this, that was our position.
Let me ask you, because of the fact that we hear oftentimes folks talk about George Jackson, and I know that you were a comrade of his. I want to, for the people, who was George Jackson, and you know, how did you all meet, become associates, comrades, etc.?
Well, George had been locked up since maybe 1960, I think, when he went in. And he had grown into a formidable leadership while he was serving time in all these different places. And his name was real big. And when I first heard about him, I just heard about him like, well, that's another Stagger Lee, you know, that's another Dolomite, you know. There's all kind of legendary brothers, you know, tough guys, you know. And so it wasn't until he observed me and this brother named Tony Gibson. He saw us practicing martial arts, and he lived in the same building with Tony. And he said, I want you to move into my cell. He says, you're teaching him karate. And I want to convert you to my bastardized form of Kung Fu. It's a lot deadlier. And so he would train Tony, then Tony would train me. At first, he didn't talk to me, but I was a librarian. And in the back of the library, I had an area where I had a blackboard, some school desks, chalk and erasers. And I had an underground, a secret Swahili class where I was teaching the brothers Swahili. I introduced Swahili as a coded language you could speak out in the open without nobody else understanding you. And I never thought these guys would do what they did with it. You know, they come and they say a word and they tell you what the word means in English out in the open. You know, they'll come on YouTube and they'll mention a certain word and then they'll give you its English translation out in the open. Well, that defeated the whole purpose. But anyway, prior to all of that going on, I was teaching these guys Swahili so that we would have a secret coded language, which eventually became outlawed by the state prison system. You can't write somebody in Swahili. You know, they won't allow you to communicate back and forth. It's outlawed. But anyway, I'm in the back of the library, and George was always looking for secret places, little crevices, you know, a shower room, a closet, a utility closet, you know, some blind spot where he could practice the martial arts. And so he wanted to come in the back of the library where I was teaching Swahili and interrupt my class. And I made a deal with him. You can come back here provided I become, you know, a participant in the class. You're going to come back here with the martial arts and you got to teach me like you're teaching him. And you can have this space. And so that was the agreement. So at first we just thought, you know, he was a cat that understood a lot of history, had done a lot of reading. We didn't know who he really was. That he was everything that we really wanted to be. And so when he would teach us how to, you know, put calluses on our hands, you know, how we would beat on these leather pads out on the ground and we would knock the skin off and, you know, make it bleed. And then we keep knocking the skin off and we keep breaking the what do you call it? The scabs, you know, and you just keep on until the scabs turn into calluses. And then, you know, he showed us what parts of the hand to make these calluses. In other words, we had to turn our bodies into weapons. And at one point, Tony's body, his hands wouldn't heal fast enough. And George looked at him and said, that's one of the signs of diabetes. You need to go to the clinic, talk to a doctor, let him see your hands. And come to find there was a situation in San Quentin where a brother got into a fight with it was a Muslim brother that was getting into a fight with two Nazis. And this other brother, Shoemaker, he backed a Muslim brother. And they killed one of the Nazis and wounded the other, but Shoemaker got stabbed over the heart. And George was working in the hospital. So he told the brothers to take him somewhere and hide him. And he come out the hospital with some streptomycin and penicillin, gave him shots so he wouldn't get the infection. And then he sewed him up, he sutured him. Okay, so at first this was just a legendary event for a long time. I had heard about it, but I knew Shoemaker because I had been locked up in youth authority with him. So when I ran into him again, I asked him, was it true? And he opened his shirt and showed me the keloid scar on his chest where George had sewed him up, you know, and saved him from dying, also saved him from getting a murder beat. because he was not discovered as having been one of the participants in that knife fight where the white boy got killed, another one got wounded. Eventually, he started teaching us stuff about how to survive in the wilderness. He showed us the different roots, dandelion and other roots, and vegetation out in the wilderness that had protein in it. And if you was on the run or you were an urban guerrilla and you were fighting out into the wilderness, the type of things that you could eat to survive off of. He knew about wind power, bison's power. He felt that he hadn't had a gun in his hand, but he felt that at 100 paces, he could hit the bullseye with any kind of weapon. He knew chemistry, science, zoology. It was different languages. It was a whole lot of stuff that he knew. And those are the things he started to teach us and preparing us. And so he wouldn't tell us who he was or what he was a part of or what his mission in life was at first. You know, he didn't trust us. He had to train us and take us through a battery of tests to find out whether or not we were reliable and trustworthy. And so, and he told us that he had one test that we couldn't fail. Okay. Anyway, he didn't talk to many of the other convicts because they had sent him down from San Quentin. He had been in a hole a long time, suspicion of murder and all that in the penitentiary. But they told him that if he brought a year clean with no incidents, they would let him go home. So when he came down there to Soledad from San Quentin, even though he trained with us in secret and we had secret meetings and conversations with him, he didn't want to be seen out in the open. He didn't want the guards to look at him as though he was organizing or recruiting or putting anything together. And so that's why he didn't talk to most of the brothers. So anyway, he goes to parole board and they shoot him down. They told him they was gonna let him go if he brought a year clean. He came with a year clean and they denied him parole. So he told us, he said, man, I'm gonna take my own freedom. I'm gonna bust up out of here. And he wanted to know what we were gonna do. And I told him, well, I'm not as desperate as you are. I think I can still get out through the parole process. So I'm not gonna go with you, but I'll help you. I'll do everything and help prepare the materials that you need to use to get out of here, even if it means making firearms and using them. If I can, conceal myself and get away with it without getting busted, not having to go with you, then I'll do that. But, we started making preparations for his escape. But in the meantime, a brother gets killed in San Quentin. Some younger brothers retaliate and stab some Nazis. Then two old blacks, and that brings everybody out. But they send most of the militant, professional killer white dudes from San Quentin down there where we at in Soledad. They started walking around with Nazi armbands on. And the associate warden is standing on the yard telling them who we are and basically instructing them on how to move on us too, to break up our militant movement. So I had to organize a preemptive strike against them, with the attempt to take about 10 people at one time, but it didn't get that violent. We spent more time fighting over each other trying to get to them. But within 24 hours, 17 of them were stabbed up, plus a guard and a teacher. We raided the schoolhouse where it was unexpected that an attack would take place. And so that's how I got kicked out of Soledad. And that also broke up his escape attempt. So, because they locked the whole penitentiary down. So he was kind of upset with me about that. And prior to that, they had killed a brother named Paul in O-Wing in the hole. He had asthma, and they shot his cell up with tear gas and killed him. And they wanted his brother to tell his mother when she came up there to pick up his body and to visit him, that he had died of an asthma attack. And I told him, no, you don't. You tell your mother the truth, and when she get here, she gonna believe you because the walls are gonna be bulging. They're gonna be pulsating. Smoke gonna be coming out the window. She gonna see flames. She gonna hear the noise and the smell of death when she gets here. But I couldn't get, there you go, failed to organize cooperation among all the rest of the blacks because we had a DJ in the DJ booth that would play music at night and you could lay on your bunk with your earphones and listen to the music. And I had him playing stuff like We're a Winner, Keep On Pushing, We're Too Far Gone to Turn Around. Everything's gonna be all right in the morning time, trying to keep these dudes pumped up all night long so that when the morning comes, they'll go on strike. The strike is really gonna be a diversionary move so that they'll shoot at people. When they see you sitting down and you're not going to work, they come in with the guns and start shooting. Well, in the middle of all of that madness, something else was supposed to jump off. You know, that was supposed to be the cover, but they wouldn't even go on strike and provide the cover. So I told them, I said, well, you didn't set the stage for them to kill more of us. I said, they kill one. I said, the next thing you know, it'll be 5, then 10 of us that they'll start killing us wholesale because there's no repercussions coming. So anyway, we get sent to San Quentin, and I'm up there in the hole. And Fred Hampton and Mark Clark get killed. First, Bunchy gets killed January 1969 in Los Angeles. Bunchy and John get killed. Bunchy and John Huggins get killed at UCLA January 17th. Then Mark Clark get killed in early December in Chicago. They're assassinated. Then the shootout on 41st and Central, a couple of days, the next day, either 1 or 2 days after the assault in San Francisco, they attacked in Los Angeles. And the LA SWAT team, that was the first time they went into action. Matter of fact, they were organized for no other reason than to dismantle or destroy the Black Panther Party. They got caps, and on their SWAT caps, their insignia was lightning bolts, like a Nazi lightning bolt. Wow. And they had 41st on one side of the lightning bolts and 55 on the other. The 41st was for their attack on the Black Panther Party. The 55 was for their attack on Compton Avenue when they attacked the SLA. You know, and that was those were the accomplishments that they boasted. That's how they see themselves. So
it's important what you said, because I've heard before that the SWAT was actually organized for the Black Panther Party. So you're talking about this is the first time that they
created SWAT. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They created them to move on the Black Panther Party. SWAT stands for some kind of special weapons assault team or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, tactical team. Yeah, special weapons assault tactical team.
I want to back up for a second because of the fact that we have a lot of viewers, some who are political, but some will be apolitical, and some are new to movement and struggle. You mentioned Bunchy, and you talking about Bunchy Carter. You said that he was from his neighborhood. Can you give a little something on Bunchy Carter so that for folks who are not familiar with who he is and his importance to our people's liberation movement coming up out of the LA area?
Well, Bunchy was a few years older than I am. And, you know, he stayed maybe 200 yards from where I live. And we used to play football in front of his house, tag football in the streets. But he also was a Slauson. I'm a Slauson, but he started the Renegade Slausons, his own faction of Slausons, and became popular in the street for that. And now you'll see people writing or you'll see people speaking about Bunchy, and they try to make it seem like Bunchy went to prison, read a couple of books, and all of a sudden, a bright light comes on in his brain, and he attaches himself to the revolutionary movement. First place, around 1957, Bunchy, his brother John, Alfonso Sinbad Butler, and the two skulls, Lanners and Ronald, and probably Charles 27X, who is dead now. They all went down and joined the Nation of Islam. And they were junior FOI. They were, junior FOI. They joined the Nation of Islam because Malcolm and the messenger, Honorable Elijah Muhammad, had been going around the country on what they call city tours, preaching the gospel of the war of Armageddon. And there were a number of tough blacks all over America that wanted to prove that they could and would fight, especially if there was going to be such a thing as a war of Armageddon. They wanted to get suited and booted and take their place in that part of history. But when the war of Armageddon didn't go down by 1961, a lot of them became disenchanted and they left the nation. But they had training and they had teachings under their belt. So their personalities had been inculcated with the training that they got from the Nation of Islam. Bunchy was one of those who had left in 1961. But prior to that, around 1959, I think, I remember he stabbed this guy, this white dude, out at the beach. He went to YA for that. He tried, I don't know if he killed him or come close to killing him, because I heard dudes come back and say they was telling him, hey, Bunchy, don't kill him. I ain't gonna kill the devil. I ain't gonna kill the devil. And so he got locked up for that. But he didn't do that much time, maybe a year or so. Then he goes to prison around maybe 63. And when he's in prison, he joins the nation again, goes back into the nation. Well, in 65, when Malcolm was assassinated, there was a big split within the nation. And so you had what we called Malcolm Muslims and Elijah Muslims. Malcolm Muslims became nationalists. Started wearing fros, what we call naturals or bushes, and carried knives or weapons at all the time, and were really, really aggressive. Whereas the other brothers in the nation, the FOI, they mainly, relied on hand-to-hand combat and defensive posture. If you don't bother them, they don't bother you. And there was a lot of animosity, because if there was a racial confrontation, they staged it themselves, okay? And the other brothers expected them to defend just like everybody else would. So they started referring to them as monks, because they just didn't want to be on the front line of every kind of racial confrontation. But they held him up when they had to, when and where they had to. They did a lot. The religious rights movement was very serious. The religious rights movement put on by the nation, and you got to understand that the Nation of Islam were the first militants in this country, as far as blacks are concerned. Term organized militants that fought on every front for our people. But in the penitentiary, once they won the right to act as a religious movement, to have prayer rugs and kufis and holy Qurans, and somebody come in and minister the services, then they kind of like fell back into more or less of a cooperative posture. Not to be the rabble rousers, not to be the front liners, not to be the ones who were the driving force pushing the line for blacks in the pen. But that's the role that the black nationalists continue to take up and be on that front line, take that posture. outside of the black nationalists, you had gangsters and lowriders who just love warfare. They come out of warlike conditions on the streets. And so anytime something happened inside the prisons where it was an affront to black people, they took up that cause, they took up that fight. But they didn't have an ideology, they didn't have a philosophy. It was just like, I'm a lowrider, I'm a rider, I'll get down, I'm a killer. And if something's gonna go down, you can count on me to go get my weapon and where we gonna meet them at or where we gonna ambush them at, and they'll go to work. They had to be grouped in to formal political style organizations with a cause, with an ideology, with a philosophy, and with a code of conduct and engagement and discipline. And so those were the ones who actually become involved in movements inside the prison system. A lot of guys will say that the Black prison movement started on August 7th, 1970, when Jonathan Jackson went into the courthouse in Marin County trying to free his brother and other comrades. And, and the judge was killed and he was killed and everybody but Ruchell McGee on our side was killed. James McClain, William Christmas, who we used to call Tree, all of them were killed that day. But no, that was not the beginning of the Black prison movement. That was basically a point of reference that basically said, we're here and this is our announcement on where we are in this national debate in this country with Black folks over violence versus nonviolence. He's the chair of the nonviolent movement with a great following. Then you got other people out here. You had Robert Williams, you had the Deacons for Self-Defense, you got the Black Panther Party, you got a whole lot of other people out here, the Mau Mau's and a whole bunch of other organizations that saying, we're gonna carry weapons, we're gonna keep our weapons, and we're gonna use our weapons defensively and if necessary, defensively, but whatever we have to, or figure it's the right time or the right reason, we'll be offensive with our weapons. And so August 7th, 1970 was us taking the stand and pronouncing to everybody that this is where we stand in the debate over violence versus nonviolence. When King was assassinated in April of 1968, Eldridge launched an attack on the Oakland police saying that the death of King registered the death of the nonviolent movement in this country, which it didn't, but that was the posture and the position that he had taken and that he was leading the Panther Party into. I'm probably just rambling, maybe getting lost with my words, and not keeping things together. But
nah, it's all good because there's so much to unpack. So I mean, I definitely, because you just took us in a beautiful direction because of the fact that, like you said, I've heard so many folks talk about prison movement beginning on August 7th, 70 as well. You were talking about Bunchy. I know you said he went into the nation, he ended up leaving the nation. How did he make that transformation to becoming was that Minister of Defense for the Black Panther Party as far as Southern California?
Becoming part of the fighting forces?
Yes. Let me say that. That'd be even.
Okay. Well, I was saying that Bunchy gets killed January 69, then in Bunchy and John Huggins,
right,
in January 69, and then Mark Clark and Fred Hampton in December of 69, and the Panther Party office headquarters on 41st and Central in Los Angeles was attacked a day or so afterwards. This is December 69. And then January 13th, 1970, they killed 3 of our people inside Soledad prison. And I had told those guys that because they didn't allow us to do what we wanted to do, to turn them away from just wantonly murdering us with no repercussions, that they had set the stage for them to start killing us wholesale. And on January 13th, 1970, it goes over the radio wires and the news wires all over America that they just fired 4 shots into a crowd of black, white, and Mexican prisoners fighting and killed 3 blacks, which is not really how it went down. They let 3 blacks, well, WL, they shot him in the heart, so he died right on the pavement. But Lil Jug and Cleveland Edwards, they allowed them to die, you know, because the hospital ramp was right there with you know, right there at their feet. And the hospital was the adjacent building. And they locked the whole penitentiary down, leave them laying out there, bring people in from school and trade, take them off the yard, lock them up in their cells. They lock the white boys up, the Mexicans up, they make the brothers go to their cells, and then they come and get them and take them through lock gates and through sally ports and into the main corridor and all the way, the long way around to the hospital. When the hospital was right there. There was a hospital wheelchair ramp, come right out onto the yard where they're laying. And so the word comes back that all 3 of them are dead. So all the brothers in the hole and witnessed that. They wrote the mothers and they told them, you lost 3 sons, but you gained so many more. Some of them used biblical verses, some of them used poetry. But they made a vow. They said, we're going to avenge your sons' deaths. We're going to avenge their lives. And so 3 days later, on January 16th, the grand jury came back and said that it was justifiable homicide. And that same night, prison guard was beaten and thrown to his death off the 3rd floor in my wing. And there was a witch hunt. And they shut the joint down, interviewed a lot of people, and they came up with 3 people: George Jackson, Fleeta Jungle, Drumgo, and John Cloutier, and they became the Soledad brothers. And so that was the first trial. And within months, another guard in the next prison, the Soledad North, right next door, was killed. And then they arrested and tried 7 brothers for that. And it was during the trial. George Jackson's trial was so political. First place, no black lawyers in LA would take the case. All 3 of them brothers were from LA. Their mothers couldn't get 1 black lawyer. Johnny Cochran, nobody else. All these prominent, tough lawyers out of LA, none of them wanted to associate themselves with the trial of 3 blacks on trial for killing a white prison guard. He just wouldn't take it. So white Jewish lawyers took the case, politicized it, and they won those cases. But anyway, in the meantime, when they would come to court in Monterey County, right outside Soledad, that whole courtroom would be full of students, white students, okay, from Cal Poly and Monterey and Morro Bay and San Luis Obispo colleges. You know, these are upgrade colleges. These ain't just like, you know, community colleges. You know, they would fill up those courtrooms. And every time George would walk into the courtroom, them white kids would come to their feet and throw their fists in their air and say, all power to the people. Shout it out, all power to the people. And one day they came in the courtroom and one of them white kids ran up and handed him a Black Panther Party newspaper, and the police snatched it out of his hand and he snatched it back, said, don't you ever snatch anything. Police snatched it again and he fired on him. And the fight started. The white kids jumped in the fight. They tore the whole courtroom up.
Wow.
And when a news reporter reported the incident and said that the Soledad brothers got beat up by the police, George reprimanded him. He told him, he said, don't you ever say something like that again. He said, we won that fight. And don't ever classify us as victims. Matter of fact, you really want to see my style, come to my next hearing. That was the posture that he had. He was not only a soldier, he was a commander of military forces. And that's why Huey Newton inducted him into the Black Panther Party. See, we didn't go to the Panthers came to us. And when Huey come to the CMC East, he was told about all kind of different brothers. He was told about our struggles, how we handled ourselves in these prisons, how we stood up for our people. We lived, fought, and died for the color of our skin and for our historical importance and relevance. And he started saying, can I get some of them to join the Black Panther Party? Because he wanted me to take Bunchy's place and lead the Southern California chapter of the Black Panther Party. But I told him that I was close to Crook, who was the Western Regional Representative of SNCC, which had changed its name from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to the Student National Coordinating Committee. I don't talk about that much, but SNCC changed its name.
Wow.
Not a nonviolent organization anymore. So it became the Student National Coordinating Committee. And they had some people in SNCC that was just as hard as the Panthers and took the same positions. Matter of fact, 2 of them got killed.
We're here with OG Kamasi. His piece is frozen up for a second. As you can hear and see, it's serious history, talking about the prison movement, talking about George Jackson, talking about Bunchy Carter and so many others, and the freedom struggles behind the wall. We're gonna hopefully we'll get him back on within the next few minutes, whatever. But definitely, if it's your first time joining us, welcome to Black Power Media. Welcome to Riot Starter TV. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the subscribe button. We have plenty more where that's coming from. A lot more information, a lot more history. As you can tell from this particular interview, it shows the different dynamics. We're showing different dynamics. We're showing different styles. Oftentimes we get folks who talk theory, and not often do we hear from the practitioners. But we know that just from this piece right here, it's so much to unpack and so much that has been unpacked. We have a time difference where we are right now, and I know that that may play a role in regards to the service and so on and so forth. But this is Riot Starter TV. You've been listening to OG Kamasi, who is like I said, a historian from the Black August Organizing Committee. He's one of the brothers who taught me, him and OG Shaka, taught me in regards to the history of Black August and that particular prison movement. So we're going to definitely have OG Kamasi and a number of other folks to join us in the near future. We want to thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to bringing him back on. Unfortunately, we've lost him on this particular round, but let's just call this part 1 and expect more to come. We appreciate you all. Thanks for joining us again. Hit the subscribe button, and I think we may have he may be logging back on now, so we'll give that a few seconds to see how that works out. But like I said, in the meantime, make sure you hit the subscribe button, share our channel, Black Power Media. We're going on our 1-year anniversary on February 17th. If you're watching this when it comes out, it'll be about a week from now. We'll be coming on our 1-year anniversary. We have so much content here on our platform. You can hear from folks like Mumia Abu Jamal. You can hear from the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army, SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Kamasi mentioned the RNA. We had Mama Tamu from RNA 11 right here on Riot Starter TV. So make sure you continue to support what it is we're doing. I see that Kamasi's back on, so I'm going to bring him back to the table.
So I think you were asking me, how did Bunchy reverse his position? He had gone into the nation as a junior FOI, left, went back in the nation, and then how did he assume the posture of a Black nationalist revolutionary? Okay, well, before Eldridge died, can I go ahead?
Yes, sir. You good. You good to go.
Okay. Before Eldridge died, he came to one of our reunions. He came to a Slauson reunion. And we walked and talked. And he talked like the old Eldridge who had been to Soledad. Eldridge who had, been a Black Panther. He wasn't talking like people would expect him to talk after his so-called defection and, his being born again and all that kind of stuff. So he tells me that when Malcolm left the nation before his assassination, a number of brothers left. He said he too left. And at this time, he had gone from San Quentin to Folsom. And eventually, he came from Folsom down to Soledad. And Bunchy was in the nation at Soledad, and the minister at Soledad told Bunchy, according to Eldridge, to walk Eldridge around the yard and convince him to come back into the nation or get moved on. And Eldridge told me, he walked and talked to Bunchy, and he said, I'm going to tell you why I'm not coming back in the nation and why I ain't going to get moved on. And by the time they finished talking, Bunchy had joined Eldridge. I would imagine that Eldridge explained to Bunchy that his position was to be a lot more aggressive than the nation would allow him to be, and to connect himself to other functionaries and organisms that he would not be allowed to do if he was in the nation. And if he was going to expand his activities and branch out into the areas that he really wanted to go, that he felt that Malcolm would have sent us if he still would have been alive in the first place, he could not do any of those things from within the context of being a member of the Nation of Islam. Bunchy had some of these same ideas in mind, these same sentiments, these same feelings, these same objectives on his plate. And I believe that's why he joined Eldridge. And they two together opened up the African History and Culture class in Soledad. In that class, you had Muslims, you had nationalists, you had lowriders, weightlifters, boxers. It was a place where on certain nights in the schoolhouse, Blacks could meet, they could bring forth their ideas, they could relate the knowledge that they had on history, they could prophesize, they could bring forth spoken mic type of poetics and all that kind of stuff, but mainly the African History and Culture class raised the question, are we free or not? Are we a free people in this country or are we not? If we're not free, then what is our classification? We're no longer slaves on the plantation, but what is our relationship within the borders of this country? since we're not free people, let's take a look through history at people who were not free but had been contained within national territories that were not their own, and who have been going through all of the same restrictions, the same persecutions, the same stuff that we have a endless chain of events that suggest that our situation is no different than theirs. How did they go about getting their freedom? What did they do? And we looked all around the world. We looked at every group, we looked at every country, we looked at every race of people. Now, at some point when I was in Soledad, I read a book called The Rights of War and Peace. And I'll never forget the opening statement in one of the chapters that expressed how free white people feel about slavery. And it simply stated, peace, when coupled with servitude, is a far greater calamity than all the horrors of war. I asked the question, how come we don't see it like that? And where on this planet are people like us who do see it like that? And why don't we find our line of kinship with them? And that's what our movement in prison was, to link ourselves up and connect ourselves to every struggle on this globe, every freedom movement, every independence movement, every revolutionary movement, and to inculcate within our charters the ideas of freedom and independence and social justice. How do they work in the Congo? How do they work in Tanzania? How do they work in this country, in that country, around the world? Where do they have any kind of peaceful coexistence among the native populations, the people who have fought to win their freedoms? And what are the laws and the dictates and the culture that they subscribe to that allows them to live in a new nation that they have formed and that they're responsible to bringing to birth, that allows them to live compatibly with one another? And so when you find that script and that concept that they operate off of, and you attach yourselves to the same ideas and the same methods, then that's where we got the idea of being politically correct from. So Bunchy joins Eldridge. They create this African history and culture class where we were able to measure our value, our worth, and our success by how many brothers left the penitentiary and went into the struggle on the streets and joined either the Black Panther Party, the RNA, or any forward-moving revolutionary organization. They were supposed to graduate from our class and go out into the real world and take part in the freedom struggle. They couldn't do that unless they had already attached themselves mentally, spiritually, and physically to the ideas and concepts that ran those groups on the streets in the first place.
You know, I'm glad you're talking about that too, because of the fact that brings me to the question of the political prisoner, right? Because oftentimes, you know, we've been fed different definitions of what a political prisoner is. And I remember talking to you maybe about 10, 15 years ago, and you expanded on the definition of political prisoner in regards to how I learned about political prisoners. And that was from the angle of folks being politicized while they might not have came in political prisoners, but being politicized while inside the joint. Can you speak on that, because of the fact that that's very important, because oftentimes, we talk about the politicization of Malcolm, but George is usually left out of the equation. He's one of those cases when you're talking about being politicized behind the walls. Can you speak on that and how important that was in the prison movement itself?
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I'll tell you the truth. Nobody in this country used the reference political prisoners except us until Huey came in. And when he understood that we were being kept in prison beyond our criminal offense terms because of our politics, he created the slogan, "Free all political prisoners." We explained to, do I have time to just read some stuff from that is on that particular subject?
Yeah, please do. Please do. Go ahead.
Because I got notes from a speech that I gave in Black August years ago. Hold on.
Okay, right on. We're here with Kamasi, OG Kamasi, and we definitely pleased to have him on here tonight. And this is if it's your first time, again, this is political education at its finest. It's on the move right now, so in real time. So yeah, definitely, Kamasi, we ready when you are.
Okay, so I'm halfway down page 3. I'm saying it was Malcolm X and Eldridge Cleaver in the mid-1960s that gave an identity and definition to the political prisoner in this country. But it was George Jackson who, more than anyone, defined the role of the political prisoner in this country as a revolutionary fighting alongside those individuals and groups who were mobilized on a global level in a common struggle for the right of humanity to enjoy a better world. He made this distinction before 1967 and before the existence of active revolutionary parties here in the US. There was no celebration of political prisoners or cry for the freedom of all political prisoners as before, of all political prisoners, before the Soledad brothers case brought an awareness to the outside world that political struggle was in full swing inside this nation's prisons, and primarily as an entire movement engaged by mostly Black prisoners led by George Jackson in the California prison system. It was a slogan and a nationwide effort of the Black Panther Party to give the political prisoners a vehicle to channel his revolutionary energies until freed by the demand of the people. So it was to this cause of fighting for the right of humanity to enjoy a better world that he dedicated and sacrificed his life, talking about George Jackson. It was to this cause that he founded within the prison movement a central leadership cadre that would amount to the American equivalent of the militant wing of the African National Congress that Nelson Mandela belonged to while he was in prison. But here in this country would be known as the BGF, or Black Guerrilla Family, who would serve as the motive faculty or driving force of the prison movement and the supposed invisible arm of the revolution outside of the prisons. It was Comrade George Jackson then, who more than anyone else brought international attention to the role that American prisons play in advancing the right wing trends towards fascism. And he explained how what today is politically called ethnic cleansing was being done to us then and now inside America's modern day concentration camps with a political cleanup routine he rightfully called genocide. He furthermore prescribed the manner in which we could save ourselves from genocide and the country from fascism by waging revolutionary war. Today we are witnessing the increasing toll these evils and the increasing toll of these evils, that these evils are taking against us because we have so far failed to stop them. Shortly before his death, he was drafted into the Black Panther Party with the rank of Field Marshal and the duty of leading its tactical division. The rest we know is written forever in the bloodstained pages of history, with a chapter yet unfinished. In conclusion, there are no words better than his own that explain his life and mission. As he said, quote, "I have a plan. I will give and give and give of myself until it proves our making or my end. The men of our group have developed as a result of living under a ruthless system, a set of mannerisms that numb the soul. We have been made the floor mat of the world, but the world has yet to see what can be done by men of our nature, by men who have walked the path of disparity, of regression, of abortion, and yet come out whole. There will be a special page in the book of life for the men who have crawled back from the grave. This page will tell of utter defeat, ruin, passivity, and subjection in one breath, and in the next, overwhelming victory and fulfillment."
Brother, that right there is the perfect ending to round one, because since you my birthday twin, we both shared December 5th. I'm gonna ask for a present of you coming back on again for a second part because of the fact that it's so much that that you laid down in this particular piece right here, and I'm eternally grateful because of the fact that you are one of the few living OGs and comrades that I highly respect, and I am absolutely honored to have had you on here and be able to lay this down. I pray that this can be entered into the time capsule of revolution, because of the fact that it was such a encouraging talk, because of the fact that you gave many who did not have the unfortunate opportunity to be behind the walls in that particular manner. We all in general population here, but being behind the walls is a whole another particular section and segment. So I definitely appreciate you coming on, and hopefully you'll take me up on that offer and come through for a second round in the near future, if that's all right with you.
Yes, sir, I will. Yeah. Prompt me to talk about how Attica actually, the relationship between us and Attica and what happened and what they actually were trying to achieve, what they were really trying to achieve that in their struggle there at Attica. That people they don't talk about it. The documentaries don't documentarians don't even understand it. Right. So, that stuff there just flew right over the majority of people's heads. The only thing they know is the number of people that lost their lives, but they don't know why and what for.
No doubt. Well, we looking forward. So you just gave what chapter 2 is going to be about, and that's the forming and the meaning behind the whole Attica rebellion. So definitely, I'll be reaching out to you over the next day or so, and we could schedule a part 2, and you can let us know when you'll be available to come on, and perhaps we can do the next one live, because this one, of course, is pre-recorded, but we will premiere it on this coming Monday, and I'll let you know the time and everything. And definitely appreciate you, Revolutionary Love, and stay the course. We will win.
Yes, sir.
In spite of ourselves. Yes, sir. So we've been checking out our brother OG Kamasi, who joined us on a late night here on this side of the coast, on the East Coast. He's over in the Los Angeles area, and he just gave us a serious look into the prison movement, amongst other things. So make sure that you stay tuned, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you know when we are coming out with our new episodes. And we just want you to remember that this is not for entertainment purposes. This is for political education purposes, and to inspire those who will come after us, and those who exist today. You're checking out Riot Starter TV. We appreciate you all joining us here on the Black Power Media Network. Stay strong, and as always, stay ready for revolution. Peace.